Welcome back, everybody. We are live with another episode of Growing with My Fellow Growers. This is Jack Greenstock, your host for the evening, and I'm joined, as always, by an amazing panel of growers, as well as an IPM specialist with us this evening. And I'll go ahead and pass it over to him first, as he was the first one to join the room this evening. Matthew Gates, how you doing?
I'm doing very well. I've been very productive, and I say that pretty much every week, but I'm happy to be so. I am Matthew Geese, the Integrated Pest Management Specialist. You can find my content about pests and disease and plant physiology on my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, the same channel I'm commenting in the chat currently, which we should make a chat message right now so people can chat. And you can also find me on Twitter and on Instagram at SyncAngel. And hopefully you'll be seeing my Spider Mite article on Dr. MJ Coco's website soon enough.
Good news to hear, and it looks like somehow they snuck in there before I even sent in a message. I was switching over to the Cheap Home Grow YouTube on my computer from the Jack Greenstock account I have as well. But next, I'm going to pass it over to Aaron the Grower.
What's going on, guys? Aaron the Grower, ATG Acres here on Instagram, atgacres.com. Just an organic grower. Happy to be here with y'all. Trimming up on some Wedding Crasher tonight.
Looks beautiful, and we'll talk a little bit about that in just a bit. Next up, Spartan Grown.
Hello, everybody. I'm Spartan Grown. You can find me on Instagram at Spartan Grown, or you can shoot me an email at spartangrown@gmail.com. I'm an organic grower at home and a synthetic grower at work.
Great stuff. Always appreciate your input from both sides there, and love that you give the email as well. You can find me at jackgreenstock47@gmail.com. For those who don't have the social medias who would like to reach out to me or Spartan, those are good places to find us. Next up, Brandon Rust. Thank you again for joining us.
You guys hear me all right?
Yes, we can.
All right. What's going on? I have Lucky here with me today because he's being a little terrorist, as always. So if you hear any squawks and squeaks, it's this guy. And I apologize beforehand. I'm Brandon Rust. You can find my IG account, which I got back in the little name bar right there. If you guys want to find education content, you can also find links to my company and the farm that I own. And yeah, always happy to be here with the rest of the panel members.
Happy to have you, as always. Happy to see Lucky, even though he's been a little bit of a pest. I know sometimes somebody said this quote, and I just will never forget it. They said it's like 100-year commitment to having a 3 or a 4-year-old or something. And it just rang so true to me, seeing how Lucky acts and many other birds that fellow bird owners have had in the past. So cool stuff nonetheless. I want to give the American one a chance to introduce himself.
Hello, Jack, everyone on the panel, everyone in chat. I'm the American one. I'm the American one on YouTube and the American one _ Keens on the IGs. Glad to be here, and hope everyone's having a great weekend.
Going pretty well for me so far, trying to finish stuff in my face, but probably not the best thing to do for a podcast. Next up, Noah the Grower.
How's it going, everyone? Yeah, I'm Noah the Grower with 2 E's on Instagram. If you want to look at anything I got going on, you can check me out there, and happy to be here.
We are always happy to have you. And next up, I want to give Dr. MJ a chance to introduce himself before we get started.
Hey, yeah, thanks, Jack. Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com. I want to make sure everybody knows about our strain review giveaway we're doing this month. Write a strain review and get a chance to win a prize. And this month, we're giving away the Grower's Choice ROI E720, a big, beautiful grow light. So come on over and write some strain reviews. And I am looking forward to the show today.
Sorry about that. Looking forward to the show as always. I want to reach out to the chat and just remind everybody this week we're trying to do a little bit of a Q&A, rapid fire, trying to answer as many questions as we can. So make sure to highlight at Cheap Home Grow or at Jack Greenstock so I can see your questions. And the other panel members are also good at answering them both in the chat as well as on the podcast. So go ahead and start asking those questions, and we'll try and get as many answered tonight as we can. But with that said, I want to give Spartan Grown, before we went live, we were talking a little bit about the second pheno of the Velvet Punch that you have just started sampling for the first time a little bit, and maybe that'd be a good place for us to start off this week.
Yeah, I was started trimming up the second pheno today, and of course I had to sample it. And so my sampling process is first thing I'll do is I take a top nug and I'll grind it all up, and I'll smoke through the whole thing. The first thing I'll do is put it in a joint and taste it that way, and then after that I'll finish it in bowls, in bong bowls. I smoke the joint to get. I think I get the most flavors that way. I think I can pick out the flavors better that way for some reason. It's like getting a clean hit on a bong bowl every time instead of just the first hit. Um, what I got is in the flavor on this one. So the first pheno that I tried was more hashy, like it tasted just super hashy and a little bit of hashy and then gas and then just a little bit of grape in there, just like a hint. And it was more the structure was more like a cookie, like your classic cookie, smaller nugs, rock hard little, and a little purpling too. Whereas these ones were a little bit bigger nugs. I think that the density is still there. It seems real dense still. And then, but the smell was this one's way more grape, and the flavor I picking up the grape more in the front end instead of just like a hint in the back end. And I'm not getting much gas in it, a little bit of gas, but it's mostly just getting grape in it. And this one, the high is far different. The first one I thought was more sedative a little bit, or at least calming. Where this one is almost racy. Like when I smoke it, like I can feel my heartbeat faster. I can. It's mostly in my head, like my eyes feel high, if that makes sense. That kind of feeling. It's
There's
pretty potent. Like I think this one's pretty potent.
there's a little bit of Mexican sativa hidden in the Velvet Punch that people don't really know about because it's labeled as Black Velvet Kush. Black Velvet Kush is Mexican sativa crossed with Chem 4, and the Velvet Punch original F1 from Doja DNA, who just did an episode last week on Green Bicycles podcast. Everybody should check out. It was a purple punch, which is Larry OG and Granddaddy Purple. That was the female that was crossed into Cookie 7. And Cookie 7 is a Thin Mint Girl Scout cookie, which was crossed to the Black Velvet Kush, which is Mexican sativa, and Chem 4. And he crossed that with Larry OG. So all that together makes Velvet Punch F1. I took that to F2 and currently have F3s in week 7 of flower. So there's definitely a nice variety, in my opinion, at the F2 especially, of both grapey and gassy and even a little bit of skunky, funky notes and some of the phenotypes that I found. And I'm actually happy to hear like the effects have a range of, things as well, because it allows people, if they want to go for that more uplifting sativa one, they can find it within there. And
Cool. Hey,
so,
I don't know if you're willing to go through it all, but I'm just interested myself. What did you go for when you made your selection to do your F3s? What would you pick out of the F2s to make that selection?
so I'd popped 20 and I narrowed it down pretty early to 15. The first 5 that I called were just not growing very well in early veg or seedling stage, and I wanted something to be vigorous just for everybody, like right out of the gate. I just want vigorous growing plants. And it also worried me, there was some pollen contamination with the 4th female, where I had a second male that I was trying to make a cross with something that I just decided to not take forward. And so I thought maybe there was a chance that those 5 had some of that genetic potentially in there that weren't true F2s. So I called those 5, and then I had 15. About half and half were male and female. And the females that I kept were healthy, vigorous growing. They didn't have any issues really through veg at all. And good root mass was something that I look for when I have the easy swap pot. So when I transplant, I look for good root growth. Primarily though, the aroma. Even in early veg, I'm starting to get some good stem smell off of a lot of the plants. I don't know if it's just this variety in general, but stuff like in the past that I've grown, a strawberry cough cross, the strawberry daiquiri, it had strawberry smell in veg. So I was like, I'm going to start looking for smells in veg more often now. And the male was just like absolutely ridiculous smelling. So the F2 male that I selected, I'd walk past the closed grow chamber and I would smell just like stinky fucking, it smelled like finished flower, but it was in veg. And I looked through all the plants in the veg chamber, I pulled them all out, and I was like, this is the one. Like, whether it's a male or female, like I'm going to use this one for the breeding. And it was just so aromatic, just unbelievable. Like it smelled just like finished, really good, dank herb. So I took that, and then I picked out my 2 healthiest females that I transplanted up, grew them out through veg. And this time I'm actually surprised because the Velvet Punch F1s I had turned purple as soon as week 3. And I grew them both in the wintertime here in California, which not super cold, but we get like 40s to 60s. And about week 3, I started seeing purpling on the F1s. And for week 7, I'm just starting to see purpling, like week 6, week 7 on the F2. So it could be the ladies that I picked, or it could just be the style of growing. I did upgrade my pot size a little bit, so I have a little bit more soil, so maybe they're not fading as soon. But with that being said, it was mainly vigor, the aroma, and hopefully the high. I mean, I haven't smoked them yet. It's hard to, when you're making as many seeds as I am. I'm not growing it, taking a clone. Like, I just grew these from seeds, and I really liked them, how they grew. And a lot of intuition does go into it the way that I'm doing it. I do understand that there is the possibility to, like, I could flower them unpollinated, and then I could make selections and then pollinate those cuts. But I just chose to pick the seeds that spoke to me sort of the most.
I like how you were saying that you kind of picked the one that was stinky and veg, because I've always taken that as a sign that it's going to be a great plant. It hardly ever disappoints. If I get a real stinky one of veg, I know it's going to be a fucking just a looker and flower.
And like the flavor usually comes through. I mean, if it's that strong in veg, then it tells me that it's got something in the genetic makeup that is going to allow it to produce lots of secondary metabolites. Like, it's already doing it in veg. Like, by the time flower comes around and all those hormones and everything change, I'm hoping that it'll be able to produce large amounts of what I'm looking for. Also, like, the smells are pretty specific sometimes. Sometimes it breeds true, sometimes it doesn't. Speaking of breeding, Kyle Breeder, Predicated Breeding, jumped in here after the introductions, but I want to give him a chance to go ahead and introduce himself as well.
Hey, sorry guys. Yeah, my name is Kyle Breeder. I'm happy everybody's here, everybody's safe. I'm glad that we're still doing this. In regards to the community, I basically specialize in feminized seeds. If anybody's looking for some, I have a website. The website is the letter P followed by breeding.com. I did release 2 new strains that people are actually really enjoying a lot. And I'm actually currently in the process of doing another massive feminization right now. So I'm pretty excited, which I'll have basically a new line coming out, which I'm pretty back cross to New England Rock Candy, so that's coming back out. So yeah, that's exciting. But yeah, if anyone should try to look at what I'm doing or what I've been posting and stuff, I'm on all social media platforms at Predicated Breeding. And again, I'm happy that everyone's here and everyone's safe and we're all doing well. So
thanks as always for joining us, Kyle. We appreciate that. And we do have a question from Chris Webb, who asked earlier. They said, I used barley straw for mulch. Now I have barley growing. What benefit are these exudates, microbes, nutrient release, ? Any tips of barley as a cover crop at Spartan Grown? So I'll pass it to you first, Spartan.
Well, I mean, ultimately, your main crop is going to be cannabis, right? So at any point to where it physically gets in the way, that's the number one thing. So you don't want it to grow into your cannabis. If it starts getting tall, barley will probably get tall. So if it gets to a certain height, just cut it down and use that as mulch. It'll dry up on top, and it'll be your new mulch. So that's not, you're going to get beneficial as that breaks down. Now, as it's growing in your plant or in your pot or whatever you're in, the root structure that it has is going to be feeding a microbe colony, and it's going to be keeping them alive and keeping them active in your soil food web. So it's going to be a general benefit, unless it gets to the point to where there's so much root mass and not enough media. So if you're in a small pot, don't be trying to do it. This really like a 1 gallon pot. I see people filling up with like clover cover crop. Well, clover you might be able to get away with because it's a little bit lower. It's not a big tall plant that doesn't have really deep root, but barley is going to. So, I mean, if I get those things to happen, and I do right now, I have a little cannabis cover crop going. I'll have to shoot a video and put it on my Instagram from hemp seed that I've been using, grinding up. So until they get to a certain height, I'm not worried about it. But as soon as I go to flower, they're all going to get cut because I'm not going to risk pollination.
That's smart. I was curious, Brandon, what are your thoughts about just the part of the question that said microbes and exudates and the benefits of maybe growing, whether it's barley or any other cover crops? I know that you currently sell them and carry them, and you've done a lot of research. And I think I remember you saying at least one of the cover crops grew up too tall and started seeding, not like with cannabis seed, but their own seeds. It was some sort of clover, if I'm remembering correctly. I think you're muted.
You want to use Dutch clover or white clover if you're gonna add a clover, which is for nitrogen fixation. It's not something I recommend on at scale, but definitely if you want to play around with it in the home setting where you can like spend more time. If you want to be able to spend more time on your garden and just kind of get in there, because I know like if I was just working a normal 40-hour a week job and I wasn't always so busy, I'd spend a pretty decent amount of time on my home grow, and I'd like to be in there. And a lot of times it's just like, oh, watering. If you do the things to keep up like a really cool healthy soil food web, and you do your crop covers and you chop and drop and you have worms in there, you can really create a system in a really small setting, small pots that mimics kind of what would be the kind of larger, like a larger system that would take a lot of time. As far as like scale though, I'm not currently running crop cover because I'm doing so much testing. The mineral requirements for everything I need are already in place.
That's a good point. I wanted to give a chance to jump over to the next question unless somebody else has more thoughts on this. I was thinking tonight maybe we could do more like kind of like a lightning round, and just if they're directed at a specific person, they can like knock it out, and then anybody else who has anything they can pile in after, and we'll get on to the next one. And I really love the chat, and there's so much good interaction that happens there that I almost feel like there's two shows going on sometimes, and I'd love to like merge those some nights where I see like a lot of really good knowledge being transferred in chats, and then I only get it when I go back and I watch the second show, and I'm literally have the time to sit down and be able to read the chat, every single comment. But I do think that the people that do just listen appreciate these episodes where we get a lot of great questions, just like this one. They said my best runs, and it's from Midmo Grow Show. And also shout out to St. Bernard's Observation Booth. I rarely get to see you on this chat, but they said you don't normally get to make it live. So thank you for showing up live this week. That's pretty awesome. See you all around the community and longtime weed nerd. So big shout out to you. But Midmo Grow Show asks, my best runs seem to be when I have brand new soil. I just use Bokashi to recycle it. Is a paste test the best way to see what I need to re-amend with?
I'm guessing this is directed at me. So this is the issue with getting like for a home grower you can like there's services that you can go out and get done to have these things analyzed, and it's kind of hard though, because unless you like have a full understanding of all the underlying concepts that go with it, it can be hard to understand. But yeah, definitely looking at data is always, in my opinion, going to be one of the best ways to identify where you can do better, especially when you're dealing, with a plant. Like for me, my plants, I don't see any visual symptoms of any type of deficiency. So what I'm typically looking at is sap tests to see how the plant is translocating what's already in the plant itself and how that's moving around, because that actually is going to give me the data for like what I could improve on. Because if I know that it's using more potassium and that's deficient in older leaves, then I know that the older that it's being moved around into the new growth, so that I need to increase the potassium. And that's regardless of whatever, you know, a soil or saturated paste test might show. So there's all these
Brandon.
different. Yes.
Can I get a quick question? How many leaves on a plant do you test, and how do you test every plant, and how often?
So when you're doing scale, you have to take base averages.
Right,
And
right,
And
okay.
you have to, and so what I'll do is, let's say I have a whole bed right now of death breath and sour cheeseberry. And I will take a soil test at the very beginning to see where it is. If everything's good on that soil test, I'm just going to do a saturated paste test for the rest of those runs. And I'm going to do tissue and sap. So I'll do more tissue tests throughout the cycle. And I'll do about 50% of, you know, if I do, let's say 6 tissue tests during a whole cycle, I'll do 3 sap tests.
All right, and
cycle.
So a tissue test, you take a piece of a leaf off and test it, and the sap, you pull some sap from the stem.
No. So what you do for both of
There you
them,
go.
you take a tissue leaf material. So you take fully synthetic developed leaves from the top, and then fully synthetic older leaves from the bottom that are still viable, that you know are still healthy. So like, okay, for like when I do a consult, right? For instance, Kailusa out in Hawaii, they're one of great company that I work with. And what you'll typically do is you'll use the saturated paste and soil tests to actually build your base. And then once that is balanced and it's consistent, then you'll move on to like the tissue testing and the sap testing. Because without having everything balanced first in your soil and your saturated paste test and being able to maintain those levels consistently throughout a whole cycle and meeting those target levels, you have to be able to do that first. So that's the first step.
So
right?
just so everyone understands, including me. So paste and soil test is obviously, paste is a soil test liquefied, right?
Yes, it's
okay.
What it represents is when you're watering your media,
solubility.
What is falling? Yeah, the solubility of your mineral nutrients in a biological form. So they're looking at the minerals that are biologically available to the plant. So it's really, really similar to like hydroponics in a sense, that when you take like fresh, clean RO water and you add your mineral elements to that water, you're having them in a certain ratio. And what you're trying to do is you're trying to maximize the solubility of those nutrients and have them fall into perfect balance.
Right. And then on the other hand, the flip side, a tissue test would be a piece of tissue, and the sap is the juice from some tissues.
So the lab will actually do the testing. So you send leaf material for a tissue test. What I do is I like to do like a whole plant. Like when I was testing bricks, just to see like what it was at certain points. And I won't get into all the things that go along with that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of bro science to that too. But it's very similar. So you pick leaves from the whole plant to get a general idea of what's total available in the plant. That's what tissue does, right? Sap test takes high and low samples. And so with that, it correlates the data of if you have everything is healthy, if everything is sufficient and balanced, then you can see how the plant actually translocates minerals and nutrients. And that'll actually give you an idea. So if you can create a flat line that's evenly distributed for new and old growth, it's really hard to do because some things are immobile and they're harder to get to certain places. But if you can do that and it's completely balanced out, that's where you're going to increase your production and your quality. You're also going to increase, I think, the resistance that those things have. I'm not saying they're going to be, immune, but it will help.
Impervious.
Yeah, it'll help increase their immune functions.
Thanks for breaking that down, Russ.
So we got another
Oh,
question.
Brandon.
All right, so we've got another question from the chat from Kyle W. They were asking about something that they heard a while back on a show. They were talking about grape compost giving better flavor, which was leading to people winning cups. And I believe Kevin Jodry was the one that they were quoting some videos of him talking about. There was a few growers in Humboldt that used a certain compost that had some grape husks in it. And he said that that led to more flavor, but they don't think that it was necessarily directly from the grape, but maybe the sugar content in that compost that maybe brought a certain microbe. But I'm curious what the panel's thoughts are on something like that.
I think when it comes to judging compost, there's only two ways that I know to do it, and use it, see how it works. That's the one way, and that's the cheap way. And then the expensive way is find somebody who fucking knows what they're doing with a microscope and have them look at it and let me know what they say. You know what I mean? It's really the only two ways to really know. I mean, we can.
That's from a biological standpoint, definitely.
Right, and that's really why we'd be using compost. We're not. Well, I guess we do use it to add some micros.
Well, so typically what you will see a lot of times is potassium and nitrogen, the availability, but it depends on where you source your compost too. And one of the problems is this, right? So depending on where you source your compost, it could be really high in, sodium, chloride, or bicarbonate. And that could potentially be an issue. I know that I have a client and they have a compost that's local, but it's, it has a lot of chloride in it. So the amount that you would want to use, you'd want to use less, as opposed to like if you were going to put together like a Cornell recipe or something similar to that, you'd want to cut it because of the mineral content, because of some of the other stuff that's in there, not just the biology. But that is really important too. If you can find stuff that's local, it's usually going to be a little bit better. And
I wanted to get back.
Hard.
Yo,
I stopped using compost actually.
So I actually want to go ahead, Tal.
Chime in on that. According to, if I understand the question, they were saying that a lot of people who do well in the cannabis cups use the same compost, and if they're using the same, they might be close to each other. It might be different. It might be a location thing, a micro terroir or something like that makes their cannabis special. And I'm just going to throw that out there that maybe they only think it's the special compost.
Or it could be that they take really good care of the grapes because it's going to be consumed with food. So the compost of those plants is really high grade because you don't have to worry about any kind of, pesticides and herbicides, hopefully.
Right.
If it was a good, so it's probably most compost when you go out there, it's like a fucking waste product that somebody's trying to get rid of more than a fucking input.
Yeah. That's the biggest problem. And that's kind of like why I stopped using it, is because in so many aspects, if it's not treated properly and it's not done right, I mean, it could potentially bring more problems than it's worth. And it's almost like I have to think of scale, right? Because that's what I'm dealing with. And it's like there's risks. There's so much risk involved. Heavy metals. There's, what if I bring in a bad pathogen? What if...
You can test for heavy metals. I mean, one time.
If you're ever interested to walk down the compost route again, you should look into worms. You could do that at large scale pretty easily, and they take care of a lot of those worries.
That's what I was actually just going to say, actually. And Spartan, I was going to go back a little bit to the person's question earlier who said reusing their soil. I've used Spartan's recipe and I started with the M3 base, which I think is a decently balanced base to start. I'd use it for one run. And after that, I'd consider it used soil, and I try and reuse that soil with I'm just going to run down. I hand wrote out a little thing that I've sent to a bunch of people, but I think it'll be good to share on the podcast because so many people are like, what Spartan Grown's reamendment recipe, or what reamendment recipe do you use? So basically he just sent this to me, so I'm stealing it from Spartan. But fill the pot with used soil and form a hole for the root ball. Add mycorrhizal fungi in the hole. Add 2.5 milliliters or half a teaspoon of insect frass in the hole. Transplant the root ball. So usually come from like a solo cup into a 1 gallon or whatever your pot size choice is there. Then top dress the root ball with a layer of worm castings. Add a layer of used soil on top of the castings. Add half cup of Build a Soil Craft blend to the top, and add a half cup of gypsum to the top. The one thing that I added was I did another kind of sprinkle of worm castings and bokashi on top, and that's what I've been doing for the last 2 runs. And if you give it a large enough pot size, the plant seems to make it all the way through really happy, healthy, and I'm not buying any more soil. I'm just buying the reamendment stuff. So that's worked really well for me. Spartan, I think, has had some good success with it himself in the past, and I've recommended it to a few other people who have been really happy with it. So even if you don't want to do the testing, I think that's a pretty safe base, and you can tweak it, add a little more of this, a little less of that, adjust it and work it to however it works best for you, But I think that's a really good place to start, even if you want to call it like just guessing or whatever. That craft blend has a ton of really good shit in there. It's like a little buffet for the plants to dig through and find out some really good shit. But
I am going to be posting a soil mix like 2.0, and it's all going to be based off of data. So, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to use things that every home grower can personally go pick up, usually at like Home Depot or like a nursery, things that are really, really common. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a base soil mix. I'm going to get that tested, and then I'm going to show them exactly how much amendment they need to mix to that soil to get it to exactly where it needs to be, so that they can do like a water only soil.
Sounds awesome.
That's
I have
awesome.
a question that I think you would really be able to answer, Brandon, because I'm pretty sure you're familiar with both these products. They said from Grow IG22 at Cheap Home Grow, how and when would a home grower utilize AgSil 16 or C90 in their organic living soil?
So C90, first of all, what that is, it is a dehydrated seawater from a very, very highly mineralized bay in Mexico. And they just basically take water and they dehydrate it, and it's full of a ton of micronutrients. And so the only thing that I use this for is a foliar application. And I do it about once every 5 days. Once a week is fine. And you use it at about a rate of 1/2 of a tablespoon per gallon of water as a foliar. You don't want to spray it with really high intense lights. So dim your lights, or, do it early and right before they wake up, before your lights come on. And it just gives the plant a little bit of extra minerals. And it also has, about 50,000 different organic compounds, and these compounds can be utilized by different microbiology, on the phytosphere.
So what about the AgSil 16? When would you use that, and how would it benefit your living soil?
Okay, so the AgSil 16 is great, and the way that this works is as a foliar as well. So I typically do about 1/4 to 1/2 teaspoon per gallon of water, and it works amazing as a foliar application. You want to make sure that, one, you're using distilled or like RO water when you do a foliar application. You also want to make sure that when you are spraying, you want to try to spray when your plants are all nice and healthy and praying. And what that is going to do, it has multiple benefits. So you get the potassium in the silica, and it has, in every single test almost that I've gone through thus far, potassium is always low in solution. Potassium is actually one of the main drivers in cannabis as far as mineral nutrient. And so having a foliar application once every 5 days at that rate can really, really improve the health and vigor of the plant, but also because it has such a high pH, it acts as a natural biopesticide for fungal pathogens. So it has two different methods, and then you can use it as a soil drench. I like to use, potassium sulfate on larger scale because it's less expensive. But Axil is a higher quality mineral input that has potassium and silica, which are both beneficial. And again, the potassium is good. As a drench, I typically base it off of my soil testing, but a good ratio is about the same for the foliar application.
Does anybody else have any thoughts on AgSil 16 or the C90 products?
Not I.
All right. I did have another question from the chat that I think I'm actually qualified to answer somewhat. Mr. Awesome, spelled AWSUM, Grow, says at Cheap Home Grow, would the alcohol and esters from the grapes contribute to the enhanced flavors? I don't know. I'm not afraid to say it. I've heard stories all the way back to the strawberry cough. Strawberry Fields was grown in a strawberry field is like the original theory that maybe brought out more strawberry flavor. And some people say it's Erdberry from Sweden or Switzerland or wherever it's from. And there's a whole lot of thoughts and beliefs about that. I've come to sort of be more on the side that I don't think it's necessarily going to just pick up exactly the taste or smell of what it was grown in. I think that it could influence the microbial activity and a bunch of other things in the soil that might influence how the plant cannabis naturally expresses its phenotype in that specific region. One thing I do know is cannabis naturally produces methylanthranolate, even without the presence of methylanthranolate. I don't put any methylanthranolate in my soil. I don't use any grape esters in my soil. I don't think Spartan puts any grapes in his soil, but I bet you if you grow the Velvet Punch, it'll smell like grape at some level. If you get a pheno, some of them are way heavier in grape, and that's not due to us dumping methylanthranolate in there or Botanicare Sweet or Purpinator or something like that. We're just using organic inputs in soil and water, and that allows the genetics to express themselves to a certain potential where they can create those secondary metabolites. I say that because the secondary metabolites are some of the more difficult things down the chain for the plant to produce. So it takes a lot of energy to produce them. And you want to, in my opinion, just make as healthy of a living condition, whether it's hydroponically grown or soil grown or whatever. You want to keep the temperature and everything happy as can be for most of the grow to get the maximum expression of the most amount of secondary metabolites, whether it's high THC or terpenes or flavonoids and other minor things.
In fact, I've even read that some of the reasons why trichomes were such an advantage for plants is that secondary metabolites, like you're talking about, if they were concentrated in one area, would become toxic to the plant, and too much. So by being able to sort of store them either in internal like glands or external glands, like with the glandular trichomes and other sorts of things, it kind of gets rid of that problem for them.
They straight up kill insects. I mean, I've seen ants get fucking destroyed by my trichomes, like killed, dead, and stuck in the trichome. And they're caustic chemicals. I mean, if you took just limonene, it's a floor cleaner, and pinene can be the same. You can use it to strip paint. And so when you extract something and purify it, they are extremely like toxic even to living things. So I think that the plant maybe creates them in specific amounts that may be beneficial for attracting or repelling certain insects or whatever the intended purpose is at the time. But definitely a great question about the grape esters in the soil. Another question followed up, I think, Brandon, this is directed at you. They say, I'd love to know what kind of issues Brandon Rust had with other forms of nitrogen and how that has shaped his choice towards soy amino acids, cost, pest attraction, efficacy, etc. ? From Amadeus Prakruti. Sorry.
Well, it seems to me to be the most efficacious way to deliver exactly what I want to the plant in the shortest amount of time. without having to, have to add, I don't know, it's just easy. I mean, I can put this in water. I'm watering anyway, right? I'm watering my plants anyway, right? So I can put this in water. It gives them, a massive amount of boost in energy, and not having to convert these L-chain aminos. They save energy in the conversion process, right? Because I've said this a bunch of times, right? So the plant will release up to 15%, or will use up 15% of its metabolic energy to create a relationship with soil microbes, either in the rhizosphere or free roaming. And they do that at the expenditure of plant exudates, which cost energy to create. And so there's that, right? So they either have to create a synergistic relationship, or there has to be something in the soil that has a nitrogen component to it that has to be break down and cycled by biology, at least in organic systems, unless you're giving these things like, a synthetic or a salt. And again, even if you give these things nitrogen that has to be converted, they're going to be turned into amino acids anyway, right? Which is going to take more energy. So it just makes sense for me to conserve energy in that aspect. And
let me rephrase the question once. What was there forms of nitrogen that you would not use or recommend one never to use?
I don't like any of the really hardcore synthetic urea, ammonium nitrate. Those types of things inhibit microbial growth, and oftentimes they're really over applied. The amount that you actually need of these things aren't, I don't know. I mean, it's convenient, it's easy, it saves energy, it just makes sense. And it maybe not make sense from like a cost production. If you were going to like do bottom dollar, you will, save more money getting organic sources of nitrogen from like alfalfa and, other things like that. But then you also have to take into consideration what else those things contain. When we're talking about amino acids, it's amino acids. There's 19 of the 20 essential things that make life happen. Okay, so that's fucking awesome. That's kind of like magical in itself, which I guess can't be related to science in itself. But
Brandon, do the plants stop making exudate?
So here's the thing: the plants don't ever stop releasing exudates into the soil, because they're always going to be needing something, especially like iron.
That's my understanding. Yeah.
Always. Okay. But
even at senescence, it still continues to. I thought it stopped at senescence.
I would think that it would slow down, but
or change. I think it could be putting out a different signal, maybe like at the end.
It's not.
Yeah, I could see that.
Completely stop, but it's definitely going to slow down at the end. And
I would think it changes.
And the thing, you can see this. There actually is science for this type of thing, because you can see how biology changes in the soil and on the plant itself, the whole thing as a whole, how it changes throughout the cycle. And
only I'm allowed to talk about the holobiont on this show. No, I'm kidding. Yeah, no, you're right. Yeah.
Well, the microbes definitely die off towards the end, so I'd imagine something else is eating and replacing them, or something is happening in that exchange during the senescence.
And well, here's the thing, right? The plant is not photosynthesizing towards the end. All the photosynthetic pigment from chlorophyll, the production of that slows down. Essentially, anything that is going to be released is obviously going to slow down as these.
That's going to be less and less and less.
Mature. I don't think these things, stop until those things are actually completely dead, or until you chop them.
So I have a question sort of related, I guess. This is from the chat from Colby Kinney. They say, why are crystals paramagnetic, or do they think they are magic or something? So I think there's kind of two questions. I think they're mixing like crystals and then like paramagnetic. There's like paramagnetic like rock dusts, like basalt. And so I'm curious if anybody on the panel has thoughts or any information they'd like to share about the actual like paramagnetic effects on soil from certain things like basalt or other rock dust.
Well, there's various organisms that are magnetoreceptive, including insects. I know it's kind of like the Philip Callahan entomology sort of assertion that like insects use electromagnetism or magnetoreception to like interact with plants, in particular herbivorous ones, I guess, specifically. I don't really find that to be a very credible thing, and there's not a whole lot or really any recent research that kind of talks about that. But I do find it kind of an interesting concept or idea for like other sort of maybe physics related effects. But I just would think that like the magnetic force of the Earth, minute that it is as it exerts on our bodies or other small things, would be much more overriding. But I am definitely not a geologist or whatever discipline would look at that kind of a thing. I guess physicist.
I'll just add that I actually spoke with a gentleman who conducted some experiments where he used rock dust outside of his soil. So a supposed paramagnetic granite based, I think it was, rock dust outside of the pot next to a plant that had no rock dust in range. And so it wasn't actually touching the soil. So he was measuring the interaction. And so he saw major increase in yields. I did a podcast with Future Cannabis Project with Jim and Linda Chalker Scott. I think that was the one that we talked about that. So it's definitely interesting. It's hard to find research that supports paramagnetivity existing, but my understanding is that it kind of uprights certain structures in the soil to allow for more passage, maybe that, whether that's gas exchange or fluid, I don't know.
It definitely seemed to impact the soil structure whenever I've heard Coot talk about it. And I don't, to be honest, I'm learning
It's
in
not
public here.
Coot, though.
I don't fully understand it.
I'm not talking about Coot. I'm talking about a guy who runs a vermicompost facility and research development team in the Middle East. I mean, in Maryland or something. I can't remember where.
I remember you telling that story too. The first person that put it on my radar was Coot when he was talking about using basalts and paramagnetism in the soil. It was something that I sort of like rolled my eyes, and I was just like, okay, this is like one of the many different inputs you can put into your soil, and like maybe it will be amazing, maybe not, maybe I don't even have access to it, so like maybe it's not worth worrying about. But I definitely think it's a good question. I definitely think crystals might be a little bit even less researched than that. I know that I've tried lithium quartz and I thought that it had benefit, but I don't think that there's anything super conclusive there. A show called The Witchy Weekend said if you're going to use crystals in your soil, and they have like a spike, for example, where it comes to like a point, to put that so it's like pointing down into the soil and like up towards the stalk. I don't know if that's maybe a little too woo-woo for some people, but we'll throw it out there. MK Ultra, which is an interesting study, but also a cool name from the chat, says, would you ever use Power SI granular in living soil? Personally, me, no. The expense there is a little too high, but I've heard great things about Power SI, both the liquid version and the granular. So I'm curious anybody else's thoughts on the panel about the Power SI granular for living soil.
I'm using it right now. I love the fact that I only got to put it down once every 30 days. That's amazing. Makes my life easy.
I've heard really good stuff about it. And I don't know about necessarily with living soil, but I've heard that stuff is like up there. And I'm kind of excited to hear Spartan saying he's trying it out. I know it's expensive, but I know a couple guys who on kind of like more of a commercial level that get really good results from that. So I have heard really good stuff.
It's one of the additives in hydro, at least when the liquid version, I think that a bunch of people who use it could justify the expense because I think it's a small amount per gallon. I think it's like 1 milliliter per gallon or something. So like a little 250 mil makes
half a milliliter.
Okay, so yeah, even less then. So it's super concentrated. So even though it's like a $70 like liter bottle or something like that, it stretches a lot further. And I'd imagine the granular is similarly, like Spartan said, he puts it down once a month. And I don't know what the dosage is, but I don't think it's super high. I've seen people applying it. It looks like it's a tiny sprinkle into the soil here and there. And if it offers benefits, and it's something that you can afford in your price range, and it's not going to break your bank, I think it's worth checking out, giving it a shot. So curious if anybody else on the panel has thoughts on that one.
Well, hold on a second. Spartan, what do you, I mean, okay, so why are you using it? Like, what is your end game with it? Like, what are you expecting to get out of it? Are you talking yield here? Are you talking just like actual nutrients? Are you talking about crystal content? I'm just curious about what the, what the improvement you're seeing with using it.
So I got handed a pack of it and said, "You want to try this?" I said, "Yeah, I'll try it."
Nice.
So I'm trying it.
There you go. Well, I mean, what have you seen? Like, are you seeing like, more
Yeah,
videos, like
literally,
I literally, it's been like, I applied it maybe 2 weeks ago.
Oh, okay.
I mean,
Okay.
So it's still, to be seen kind of a thing.
Yeah. I'm just curious because like I have a pretty good system that I've perfected myself, and I'm always hesitant to introduce something expensive like that. I'd love to try to sample out. And I was just really curious to see, that's like one that I've heard like multiple people tell me, hey, you got to try this out. So I'm just really curious about it.
Yeah. And I've been told by the rep that actually the granular is organic. They just haven't paid for the paperwork to get the Omri listing on it. In fact, I should grab it. I don't know. It might have it on there now. This has been a while ago since I talked to him.
There's a few products that actually are like that. It's kind of crazy to think that like somebody is actually organic and they just don't want to go through the process because it's such a pain in the ass. Crack Babies DWC, what a name. I've read Grounding Your Pots and that they didn't add anything else, but there's some interesting stories about Swami Select. He's also known as Gas, but Swami C, I can't even try to pronounce his last name. He's had a story about grounding his pots with like copper wire, and also the guy from House of Harlequin, Wade Laughter. That's how he found the Harlequin plant. He grounded like 4 of his pots and then didn't ground the other 4, and the ones that were grounded faded kind of like a Harlequin, like it was like a red and multiple colored fade, where the other ones just kind of stayed green and went yellow at the end. So I think there might be something to the whole grounding the pot thing. I've never personally tried it.
I think it ties in with the basalt and maybe even the crystals, because it's all about electrons somehow and how they flow. And when it's grounded to that has a place for loose things to go when it's grounded. So I don't know all the super science, but the same thing with the basalt too has to do with some sort of electronic transfer. And I know that the crystals have like millivolts they generate automatically.
They're detectable on a meter.
Yeah, I wanted to add that. Like I say it a lot, if there's something that people are preaching that'll help your plants and it won't be detrimental and it doesn't cost very much, I'll throw it in the mix just because I want everything to be the best. So, and we don't know all the magic intricacies of life and how it all works. So I believe that, if it doesn't hurt, if it won't hurt, I'll give it a shot. So that's my 3 cents.
I really do believe there's a lot to intention and energy as far as if you believe something will work. It doesn't matter what the fuck it could be a fucking troll doll. It could be
placebo effect is one of the strongest effects in science, in my opinion. It's hard for many drugs to beat the placebo effect, and that's why they don't ever end up becoming a drug. Okie Grower added that paramagnetic energy is what keeps clay from compacting. So that's where maybe I can't remember exactly off the top of my head where I heard
you guys are thinking about soil structure, covalent bonding and different types of chemical bonding. That's
right. That's a different kind of bond. It's like an ionic bond. That's it's my understanding too. That now paramagnetivity is its own thing.
I don't know, but I was what you guys were talking about earlier on rock dust. So
I like the voodoo.
Every single element has a different charge density, and that affects that affects its ability, like it's antagonistic to one each other. Calcium and magnesium and
does it do with the
potassium? Yeah, it is so these different cations.
There's cations and anions. That's what
Yeah,
he's
right.
talking about,
So
the
these
charges.
different cations, they
Yeah.
have different charge densities, and so different ones will have a higher impact on other ones, right? And it's the same on all these different type of clay particles and metal ions that you're putting into the soil. They have different type of relationships with other ions in the soil, and so it'll create different unique effects with the different types of oxidation and redox potential, where there are different things, there's different electron transfers between elements, and there's different bonding capacities. And what it all comes down to is like these charged elements and their ability to affect one another. I mean, that's what's happening in photosynthesis is, these proton or these electrons are being charged in the chloroplast that are brought in by hydrogen. It's these from the H2O. They take the hydrogen off gas or they use the carbon to make things, and then they off gas O2, CO2, or oxygen, O2, sorry. So it's really interesting because they all play different relationships, and it's very similar to the way like pH works, right? Because you have different ranges of pH where things are available, but when you have different elements in soil, they also have these different like charge densities to them, and so they'll interact with each other, and they're always doing that in real time.
I want Dr.
Real quick before you jump in, I need to answer Smiley Scarden in the chat. He was saying paramagnetism simply means that there is an attraction to a magnet. And what I wanted to respond with is the actual definition of paramagnetism, which paramagnetism is a form of magnetism whereby some materials are weakly attracted by an externally applied magnetic field and form internal induced magnetic fields in the direction of the applied magnetic field. So not everything that is attracted to a magnet is paramagnetic necessarily. Like there are certain metals.
We're talking about ions that could potentially be affected by electrical fields in soil. They would have to probably be kind of high electrical fields. And what I think that in my mind is saying that, it has the potential to direct, similar to the polar opposites, the certain metal ions in a certain direction.
My thought is it might have some interaction with the microbes that make soil aggregates. Like if you were to yank out a root ball out of the soil, these things that were like small pieces of sand, silt, clay, and other organic matter that become these clumps in the soil. It used to be loose soil, but then it becomes like a clump. And I think that might be partly paramagnetic, partly microbe communities tying this stuff together. But that those soil aggregates, I think that there's a lot of chemistry and science going on that we're still kind of breaking down the understanding of.
Well,
there's various kinds of bonds there.
I want to get Dr. MJ's take on all this paramagnetic crystal stuff because he has
I'm curious too, honestly.
Schooling background. I wonder if it was even mentioned in his studies.
I appreciate Jack's clarification of that definition and what we're sort of talking about. There are things that line up with magnetic fields for sure in organisms and in living bodies. I keep feeling like this gets back to the, plugging your plots into the ground conversation that we've had. Is that where this started right now?
It kind of sort of did, but there's a few different questions. Crack babies.
So I don't think I don't think that that's going to do it. Now, I do think that the plant would respond if you grew it in different places. Although there's been studies on sort of how plants respond growing close to like electrical transformers and stuff like that.
Bees have negative effects.
What's that?
Yeah, they say routers will make seeds not pop, supposedly, if you try starting them right on top of your Wi-Fi router.
Oh, I was just saying that honeybees, for example, have been studied with, but that's sort of a special case. A lot of Hymenoptera seem to have some like weak sort of magnetoreceptive ability, but they're not plants. So.
I remember that there were.
But
Yeah, I'm
They-
not really.
they-
I haven't read up on any reliable research on this topic. It definitely seems a little bit. I mean,
Well,
it
the
depends on
bees-
exactly what we're talking about. I think.
The
I am
bees
not a physicist.
recognize the bees
I'm not a
recognize the
physicist
electrical.
either.
The bees recognize the electrical field from certain flowers and plants, supposedly.
Well,
I
they
can find-
also
Yeah.
pollinate a lot of the plants that provide the food, and not necessarily cannabis, but and they
Well,
are
actually, their
important in the
their
case of
eyes
growing.
are really important
Something-
for that.
I'll
Yeah,
find that
honestly.
study. I'll find that, babe.
You find that study. I'm curious, honestly.
The ability
But,
to recognize something is different than having it physically alter your sort of organism too.
Or at least in a
Well, great
fundamental
point.
way.
Onto things
Yeah,
in
great.
different ways.
So there was another question from Big Jar Grows that I wanted to get in there because I think Brandon might be able to answer this, and I'm sure some of the other panel members will as well. I do like foliar and I see a lot of the benefits of it, but I don't want to act like I'm doing it all the time over here because I'm not. Big Jar Grows asks, at Cheap Home Grow, with all this talk on foliar feeding, how do you foliar so many different products per week? Because it seems like, Brandon, you specifically, at least when I hear your rotation, it's like you put in Bavaria Bassiana, you're using maybe once every 5 days Agsil 16 or C90, I should say, and then a few other products that I've heard you mention foliaring. So I'll pass it to you first, and then maybe anybody else on the panel who wants to jump in can, if they foliar multiple times a week, talk about how they like to go about doing it.
Yeah, so basically when you do a foiler application, you want to make sure that you have a couple of parameters in place. You need to have clean water. You need to have the right pH, and then also you kind of want to make sure that you're not going to do things that are going to antagonize each other. Like you don't want to run like something like C90 and then do like enzymes right after it, because you could cause some interactions where you have enzymes that are interacting with a bunch of organic minerals on the plant surface, and it can cause damage. So you have to be mindful of what type of products you're spraying in what order.
I think that's very sage advice. Like the one that comes to my mind is sulfur around oils. Like you don't want those to be too close to each other. I've heard that there can be detriment too close together. Smart Poker.
Sulfur and biocontrols and fungi, for that matter.
Great point. Yeah, sulfur is a pretty hard, not like it's harsh necessarily on the plant, but it's harsh on a lot of the other things around the plant, like the maybe micro or hollow
And your
biome.
lungs, be careful.
And
Yeah,
so
definitely.
it's just like the soil system, right? There are certain nutrient interactions that work really well together and things that don't play nicely together. And what you have to do is with your biocontrols or your foliar programs, everything on a larger scale, you have to be able to do the exact same thing. And you need to find relationships with your biocontrols, your nutrient feeding programs, your spraying applications that all work really synergistically together, because that's where you're going to find the most effect.
Good point.
Got to integrate your pest management.
Exactly. That
Key
is
to
part
do,
of
for
the
sure.
integrated part.
That part is a big part of the IPM, right?
Yes.
Smart Poker asks, can we say more about what a convalescent bond is?
Pretty sure he means covalent.
Covalent? Yeah, I was going to say, I
Covalent.
don't think I know what a convalescent bond is. I think I'm reading that right, how they wrote it, but maybe covalent.
Yeah, covalent. I think it might have just been an autocorrect or something like that. A covalent
A
bond
crippled bond.
is
I was like,
a type of bond where two atoms share an electron.
There we go.
And
Boom.
they usually want to set in base pairs of 4. If that, am I correct, Dr. MJ? They want to have 4 bases.
Then there's like carbon and hydrogen bonds, right? Or the other.
Yeah, they don't have to.
But
Yeah,
they
a covalent
typically-
bond
but-
is just a bond between two.
This is definitely like flashing back several years for me to some classroom that I was half paying attention to.
I'm gonna look up something. There's
Yeah.
types of covalent bonds.
Yeah,
and-
there's a couple different types, and I know that that there's a lot of the oxidation and redox has to do.
There's a polar bond and a hydrogen bond here.
Ionic bonding is another one too, right?
That's the hydrogen bond. I think the like the
ionic is the other
bonding,
type of bonding, essentially.
where it has an electron transfer.
Yeah, there's a transfer. So an ionic bond, there's a transfer of an electron. A covalent bond, they share an electron.
Yeah. And my understanding though is if you have, two electrons that they'll want to bond to another pair.
Yeah, well, they want to bond to something. They have a charge.
Yeah. So anything that's charged, and that's one of the biggest things was iron, right? Iron is one of the things that I see in hydroponics where it's like always trying to reach to get there. And it's because even if you put a biologically available form, Fe2 plus iron into your soil, as soon as it hits water, what's happening is all the fucking hydrogen is creating chemical bonds and oxidizing,
just dissolving it in a lot of cases. Yeah.
Yeah. So even if you're using so that's one of the things that I'm doing is if you mix a fulvic before you mix some of these micro nutrients that have high charge values, it can make it so that way they're not oxidized in solution. So when they go into the soil, because that's a whole nother thing, once they hit soil too, then it starts to change immediately. And these reactions are immediate. It's the same as if you took a piece of sodium and put it in water. You can see the sodium spin around and react immediately, or vinegar and baking soda. Even though we're not physically seeing these reactions, they're happening in real time.
That makes good sense. Great example there. I have a question there from MK Ultra again. Do you separate seed sprout tea from compost extract /tea, or is adding seed sprout tea at the end before watering fine? That's what I've been doing for years, LOL.
I answered this in chat too, but for me, I kind of look at a compost tea more as a foliar application because you're using that stickiness of the exudates that you're getting in that brew to stick them to the leaves. And then the seed sprout tea is more like an enzyme. Look at it kind of like an enzyme, and I like that more as like a root drench. So it's kind of two different applications, really.
Yeah.
Both great, but very different purposes. Does anybody else have a thought on that?
Yeah, when I used to do the enzyme teas, I typically would do alfalfa and barley in veg because of the different enzymes that those produce. And then I would switch to corn and barley and flour. And it's not something that you have to do like continually. Like, it's just one of those things that, it can really help increase the enzymatic production in the soil.
Hey, I have a quick question. So
Go for it.
I've been told, or I've heard, that enzymes they don't well, I guess they were used over and over. Is that true that they disappear? How did
Matthew?
Yeah. Do you guys know what I mean?
Are you saying they're like indestructible? They don't go away?
Yeah. They're like a wrench, and it gets used and then it drops off and gets used again, kind of.
Wait, can you ask that question again?
Do enzymes break down, or are they forever? Let's start with that kind of question.
Oh, I see. So usually I think what we're talking about is enzymes as a capacity for as a catalyzing agent that makes
yes.
Yeah. I think so sometimes, and sometimes they don't. It depends really on the kind of enzyme you're talking about, off the top of my head. And really tons of and just since you have me talking about enzymes, since we were talking about the Callahan and paramagnetism and insects sensing stuff, there's also a question about how insects get their food. And let me tell you what, it is the sugars in plants that most insects want. They want a bunch of other things too, and depends on the insect. It's a very broad topic, but that's kind of how they power their flight and their movement. They have an enzyme, and they have trehalose in their body. They take sucrose usually, and they break it down, and then they turn that sugar from sucrose to glucose, and then into trehalose, and then that's their blood sugar. And then when they need energy really fast, like when they operate their wings, they use a trehalose degrading enzyme. So it just like you pop that trehalose in a socket, it breaks it down, it just keeps doing that really quickly. And so they can get a lot of energy to quickly flap their wings. And that's how that works.
And is that in like an ATP cycle where it's...
Yeah. So the trehalose is produced in their fat cells called adipocytes.
Okay. And that's broken down to release the ATP as energy for all the biological functions.
Yeah, and the trehalose is really important because I think it also is the case for crustaceans, because they come from that same clade. They need a bunch of sugar in their body kind of floating around in their hemicyle, which isn't quite blood. And so if they had a ton of sugar like sucrose or glucose, then it would be really bad for their body. They would have a problem with the homeostasis, essentially, which is what people like to talk about. But the case is that they have the trehalose. They can turn into trehalose. They have that trehalose blood sugar, quote unquote. And that's why those ideas about sugar and it fermenting in their bodies don't really make sense to me, physiologically speaking.
And that's why this is one of the things where I said earlier, we didn't want to get into the whole BRICS thing too, because if you have a clear understanding of biology and how things evolve, together, how they co-evolve, a lot of the stuff where it says, hey, this isn't going to work if you do this and this, I'm right there with you, Matt. It just doesn't make sense from a scientific standpoint.
Third that comment there, but I wanted to get a chance for the Brightside Grower to have their question evaluated. They said, does amino acid nitrogen have antagonist relationships with gypsum? I read on a soy amino product to avoid mixing with gypsum.
No, I actually mix them both together pretty frequently. It works really great because one of the things that is a benefit for the amino acids is they're natural chelators, and they actually can increase calcium movement by, I think, up to like 1,600%, if I remember correctly on one of the studies that I had read.
That's a big percentage right there.
I was reading an interesting interpretation about sort of mycorrhizal fungi in general, that because in some cases the relationship is not as mutualistic as it could be for the plant. Mm-hmm. In a lot of cases, when we think about them, we're thinking about them as facilitators. But what if they were mafia bosses? What if they were mafiosos that said, hey, we've got your entire root section cordoned off. We'll decide what nutrients you get. And you better give us that tasty hexose that you're producing.
You better pay us that tax.
And that's what I've been talking about, Matt.
Because we talked about some of that, didn't we?
That's how hydroponic growers think about it, Matthew.
But the hydro store is the mafioso, and they're fucking squeezing every dollar out of you.
So, I was thinking today, I was like, I wonder what percentage of like home grow failure is due to people at the grow shop just giving terrible advice, because I go in there all the time and I'm just like
85.
I'm just like, dude, yeah, that's the number that I probably came up with. I was thinking almost 90, but 85 to 90 was the number that I came up with.
Perhaps it's hard to say. Different areas.
I can't tell you how many horror stories have started with dude at the grow shop told me that, or the guy at the hydro store said, and I'm like, whoa, they're just trying to sell you something or several somethings.
I mean, don't get me wrong,
as much as possible.
There are some legit guys that work at hydro shops and stuff like that, but
oh yeah, for sure, that too.
Be wary.
They're a lot like
very wary.
They're a lot like Western doctors. Be wary of them as well.
Oh, I can attest to that one Straight up, I got talked into a surgery I didn't think I should have had, that I shouldn't have done. So yeah, don't
Well,
go to a surgeon.
I don't think
Don't go
any
to a
of
surgeon
you
talking
went
about
to a.
surgery. They're going to give you a surgery.
Well, I don't think any of you ever went to an Asian doctor, as far as I'm concerned. I went to China, and let me tell you, I would not, at least the places I went to, would want to go there.
Eastern medicine has its follies as well.
Oh, boy.
Thunder Dan says, if you drop too many enzymes into the soil, it will make nutrients more available, and you could burn a plant. In organic settings, less is more. So I just figured that was a comment worth sharing to help people avoid maybe overdoing it with the enzyme products, because if that is a possibility, you don't want to do it.
Especially if you go and try to use one of those like Hygrozymes or Dr. Zymes where I mean, I use those have used those for cleaning and for foliar applications. What can really happen is because they have enzyme that degrades cellulose, you could just completely melt your root system and destroy your plant. Same thing by spraying it if you apply too much, because I've seen people spray stuff right out of the bottle without diluting it because they thought it was like a ready to go type situation, and they just completely melted their plants. Like, what happened to my plant? I was like, dude, that thing's melted, bro.
I hate to laugh at those failures, but damn, yeah, sometimes you really got to make sure you're reading that bottle and not spraying a overly concentrated something onto a plant, because that can be a real catastrophe. Like, imagine if you did that with just like concentrated nutrient, right? Like, you just gave it pure, like, and didn't dilute it down to the amount per gallon, how bad it would be.
And I want to make it clear, there are just as many dangers to organic agriculture too. If things aren't done properly, there's it goes both ways. It's really just the responsibility of the farmer to make sure that things are how they should be, and you're not creating any type of waste runoff or anything like that.
We all have to do due diligence in this field for sure, especially when there's like proprietary brands out there like putting out shit that you really don't really know unless you look at their MSDS to see what is chemically in there. I want to give a shout out to Kyle, Predicative Breeding. He didn't really have a chance to jump in at all during the show, but he had to leave a little bit early. So if you want to find his work, pbreeding.com for feminized seeds and Predicative Breeding across all social media platforms. Thank you, Kyle. He jumped out a little bit ago, so I just want to give him a big shout out and thank you for joining us, even though he didn't jump into the conversation tonight. So always happy to have him regardless. I was reading his message and I thought it was a question. So make sure to keep on asking those questions in the chat. I feel like we've been doing a pretty good job, rapid fire, getting to as many as we can. If you do have grow related questions, or just questions if you're curious about us personally, any other growers in particular, I think a lot of our individual episodes have probably been taken down off the Cheap Home Grow from when we first, a lot of us got introduced to doing cannabis podcasting. So if you have you could just be like, hey, Spartan, where'd you get that hat? Or what brand is that hat? And then we'll give Spartan a chance to talk about his hat for a little bit. And then I'll ask Aaron about his hat.
Why aren't you wearing a hat, Jack?
Because I just got my hair cut and I got to show off
it looks good. Looks
baby
good.
Jack. You can see my teeth again and my smile and all that good stuff. I look like a younger man once again. So we'll see how long that lasts. Shout out.
I want to say that I was probably wrong about the enzyme comment. One of the main things that makes enzymes so great is that they usually don't break down in their enzymatic processes. Maybe there's a couple of caveats. I don't really know off the top of my head, but shout out to, was it Smiley or was it Smart Poker? One of y'all were making that comment, and I checked myself, and that is the case. So even people who are, I mean, even people who know what they're talking about usually can sometimes make simple
Dude,
errors.
I'm wrong every week. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. I'm not worried about it, but I don't want anyone else to be misled. So
that makes sense. And I think actually being wrong is great. It's one of my favorite things to do because it usually just means that you learned something. If you're humble enough to like admit that you're wrong and just take in the new information, if it's good information, that's often a great time to learn. Emma Diaz.
Three Dog Night, right?
You know, my understanding. My understanding was
Oh,
like
man.
enzymes are kind of like a key that like inserts things to unlock, to break things apart.
Ribozymes are really interesting too. You want to talk about? I was actually reading about them a couple of days ago. So those are like RNA strands that work like enzymes, and that's kind of how I think viroids work.
And you know what's really interesting? For all of those ribosomes to be created and then folded into little proteins and all that stuff, it all takes those metal ions, and potassium is one of the main drivers in folding those proteins. Or folding folding the ribosomes. I actually, if you guys got the link for the Dropbox, I'll keep posting it throughout the week. There is a article in there about the importance of potassium and how it works to fold RNA and
yeah, Brandon, I
all those complex
screenshotted
molecules.
your stories to have access, but I'm gonna have to type it all out. You're gonna put those links in your bio at one point, maybe? Or
I mean, I don't know how to do it. If I did, I would have just made it simple, but that was like the best thing that I could figure out.
Okay. Well, if you put it in a regular post, then you hit the 3 dots in your mobile and copy link. Then you go to your real browser, put it in there, find where it is, and then you could copy and paste any links in an IG post easily into your browser from there. That's
You'll have to walk me through it later. Because I think I might be able to do a pull down somehow, but someone said I can do a pull down, like a swipe up.
Yeah, that's for like pages with more than 10K, or if you're a business account, they'll let you swipe up.
I have both of those.
There you
so
go.
You should be able
you
to.
can do it. All right.
We'll talk about that off air. Otherwise, you could DM Brandon for that.
Speaking of 10K, congratulations on your High Times repost, man. Killer job.
Dude, right?
Looks beautiful. What a beautiful.
Cool.
Very cool, Brandon.
Yeah, dude, I thought that was so sick. Hey, because here's the thing, right? I've been, I'm out here pounding pavement, hustling, and I'm like, look, dude, we have to have media. And I was like, what? I was like, I don't think there's anything that I could possibly do as far as like marketing that I don't think anybody else could do it better than what I could put together. And I was like, but how do I do that? And I was like, you know what? I got a friend in San Diego. I'm going to get him out here and I'm just going to have him take pictures. It's like, this is good. This is where it's at. And I'm going to build my farms page with all the rad pictures. And then I'll do the little thing where I have like the 3 picture layout where it shows like, week 2 of veg, week 4 of veg, start a flower, and then macros of that crop again, and just kind of build my content based off of like the imagery that we can kind of create and be attached to. And it worked, I was like, dude, because you can't buy that kind of publicity. 2.6 million followers is a lot of people. So if you guys are listening, definitely go on High Times in IG and go and comment on that post, help push that stuff. Because ideally what it does is it helps get exposure to, organics out here in Oklahoma. And I really want to help try to push that because I have a lot of friends, including Aaron over here, that are coming out here to prep for federal legislation, so
big ups to that.
Really
I want people to know where they can find it because I couldn't. You told me, High Times reposted me. I went and I typed in High Times like 6 different ways. I wrote High Times Magazine. They're shadow banned as fuck. So you have to type in every single letter. And Brandon, you used to say that about your account, and I could always find you just typing in like 1 or 2 letters. I think maybe because I follow you and engage with your page. But with High Times Magazine, you had to type in High Times Magazine.
And it's the one with the blue check because there's so many imitators as well. There's so many pages where they have that in so many different ways that you have to look for the one that's checked. So,
and I couldn't believe they shadow banned a fucking verified page. Like it was legit, and I follow a bunch of 18 plus pages or whatever. So like my account is an adult account, so I don't know why they'd be hiding it from me. I follow only cannabis related content, so I found that extremely bizarre and odd. But Amadeus Ruti again with the question at Cheap Home Grow: how long has ATG Acres been growing off grid? Anything he'd change if he were to do it all over again?
I've been growing off grid for 2 years. 2.5 if you consider when I was like transitioning. If I could do it all over again, I would move to Oklahoma sooner because California's regulations for setting up raw land are exorbitant in terms of funding. So that's where I'm at.
It's
Way
not
more
only
regulation.
that, man, I hate to get political, but I'm gonna have to just for 1 second. I think one of the biggest problems is that self-sufficiency really allows for independence. And I think a lot of our country is trying to really, really push dependence on corporations, and which is essentially government, because they are so intertwined and the inner workings are the same thing. And so if you have an opportunity to, grow your own food, and it's so crazy that they would code like how you can sell food, your own food that you grow on your property. Like there's laws.
I mean, let alone that, dude. What about like
insane.
What about building a structure on your property?
Yeah,
like what if you want to put a shed up? Well, Oklahoma, you can just throw a shed up and go pay the permit department $50. You don't need a building inspector. Here, building inspector's got to come do an ecological evaluation of the land you're going to put the permit. I mean, this is like a $60,000.
Yeah, so why do we care about that?
It's insane because it's not.
I'm not saying don't care. I'm just saying there's it ends up being too much money. It's just too much. I can't afford it.
And here's the thing.
It shouldn't be something you should pay for. I agree with that for sure.
Over regulation of taxes of everything. I'm gonna be straight up. We should all be revolting. The revolution that made this country, the taxes that we had. Look at that. The taxes that we had would look like a birthday present to all of us. Because, dude, it's like this. If you don't work in this country, then you can't live, or you have to live off social welfare. But if you
Brandon, I just gotta say this: a lot of our listeners are international. We have a huge Canadian audience. None of this means shit to any of them. I hate to say it. We should really stick to growing and avoid the politics as much as we can. In my opinion,
Canadians are infatuated with American politics. I know many, but besides that, I think we should all revolt anyway.
I've only gotten complaints for politics talk. Only got complaints for this, never for growing.
All right, let's bring it back. Hold on a second.
We'll bring it back to the
got to politics is
we have like 10 questions lined up.
Regulation of cannabis, right?
Yeah.
Regulation of cannabis, and it involves politics, so it's sometimes necessary to discuss. But
it's because we can't be independent operators in so many places because of the legislation.
Exactly. Well said, Brandon.
It's more difficult, and the barrier to entry is much higher, but you can't say can't because there are people doing it.
Lots of money.
It is a lot of money, and a lot of us won't be able to do it, but we do have the option to get a medical recommendation in California to grow unlimited plant count for your own personal needs. That's part of Prop 215 that still exists that a lot of people don't talk about. I personally have one. My doctor's written to me for several years, including the past 2 years since Prop 64. So, I mean, we can talk about a lot of the negatives, and when we're just talking about being dependent on the government, that's a little more than cannabis regulation. I'll just say
that. Every man, woman, and child should be allowed to grow cannabis in their backyard. I don't care.
Here. Cheers to that. I 100% agree, and I don't think anybody on this panel disagrees.
I mean, in my area in California, you're only allowed to grow 6 plants.
Not if you have a medical recommendation. And
even with a medical recommendation, they are still rating you, and they're still dropping the ball on you.
Outdoor is different. I'll say that.
Outdoor with a locked fence. It's completely up above board. I mean, this is like a $10,000 fence we put in. This is not. It's got barbed wire on it, so it's 10 foot tall. I mean, but they still will not let you grow more than 6 plants in my county. Now, there's probably 6 counties or 11 counties in California that'll let you do unlimited canopy or plant count, but it's
only
rare,
1/3.
Man.
It's 67% have banned all outdoor cultivation, all greenhouse cultivation. So 1/3 will allow you to grow outdoors, but indoor they cannot legally deny you the right to grow your 6 plants. Or if you have a medical recommendation, like I do and many others do, that grants what's called limits exemption. Google that. I could go look at my rec right now, which actually needs to be renewed soon. But there's a limits exemption that allows you.
Don't tell anyone you grow inside, not even your mother, and you should have no worries.
You really shouldn't, honestly, but they give you the protection if you do grow indoors. You can grow as many plants as you want. It's just a lot more difficult to do that, and a lot worse strain on the grid. And the state that probably has some of the best geography to grow some of the best outdoor and greenhouse cannabis. But that being said, Grow IG asks, at Cheap Home Grow, any advice for taking a clone from a plant about 10 days into flower? I would treat it just like any other clone. 10 days into flower, so early into flower, the hormones are switching, yeah, but it's going to re-veg or whatever during the time that it's growing roots. Like, you probably won't even know that that's like a monster crop. I think some people call it clone, but I'm curious what everybody else on the panel has to think.
It might be a little bit funky, but you're fine.
Yeah, it'll be funky, but if one little tip I'll give is if your veg room if you have just like your cloner in your veg room and the light cycle is like 20 like light 4 dark, or some guys will even do 18-6 in their veg room to save money. It's going to be easier to re-veg a plant that's in flower if it's just 24/7 light. So that's a little thing I do.
I always agree with that for clones. I think it's easy. Usually your veg clone or cloner light is pretty low powered, so it doesn't cost a ton to run 24 hours. It also provides a more consistent temperature. So if you're in like a really cold place during the winter, that light off cycle might actually make it so cold that it won't root, or you'll have other issues. So having a light on 24 hours while you're trying to get it to root can be super beneficial. And in the early veg, especially if you took a cut 10 days into flower or even later. I know people that have taken buds, literal straight up buds, and instead of re-vegging the plant, they just take a single tiny lower bud and then throw that in the cloner. They root that, and then that grows roots, and instead of taking up a full pot and trying to water.
I've rooted. Sorry to cut you off, Jack. I'm sorry. I was just gonna say I've rooted some ECSD that was in week 10 of flower, and I mean, it took a month, but it shot roots like no problem.
Yep. And it will come back. It's definitely a process. If you have a plant that you love and you really want to fight to keep it in your library and you have no one else that has backed up copies, I'd say that's the time to do it. Oftentimes you're better off just like popping more seeds, fucking growing other shit.
And always get yourself a plant packer and send your boys some copies.
I'd say
check it out.
I'd agree. Treat it like you were doing a regular clone. And yeah, I'm impressed, Aaron. That beats me. I did one at plus 8 weeks, and it took no worries. I have one right now. I'm attempting to get the perk out of bud form. I could show it if you guys want to see.
Show it to us. And Spartan just showed off the plant packer. He was like our very own Van White.
I missed it.
Spartan White. He's got it right over here.
You're the man.
Next to
You're
him.
the man, Spartan. I love you, buddy.
I didn't have the chance to spotlight him, but people will see it. They know what's up. We've got the Brady Bunch view going on. The American one's about to show off some plants here. I've also got a question from Sean Russell for Brandon after this. So what are we looking at, Tao?
All right, yeah, let me get it a better positioning. It's basically just I was like, I wanted to try and keep this because it was good. It was all purple bud when I took it, so you could see those 2 little green nubs coming up.
Mm-hmm.
I have faith that this baby's going to come up and be a plant eventually.
Everybody send Tao good vibes so his plants root right there.
Tao, show off that crazy ass mutant plant you have too. That's one of the craziest cannabis plants I've ever seen in my whole entire life.
That's
a
thing
cannabis
is
plant.
so old too now.
Fuck? Yeah, it's so cool too.
It's like stacked like a million nodes high. They're really tight node spacing and like the craziest leaf.
Is that ABC?
Really short node spacing?
It probably
not bastard.
It probably has.
No.
It's not. Isn't it some butter cheese, right?
It's butter cheese. It's a Platinum Dosi by Cheesequake.
Hey, if I send you a plant packer, will you send me a cut of that?
If I could get a cut, and you know what? Someone gifted me ABC seeds. So listen, this plant
that
is
was
like
full duplex. I'd imagine.
How old is
Full
that
duplex
fucking
data,
thing?
man.
I was going to say this thing has got to be 3 months old. About 3 or 4 months old. So
that's like a cactus, dude. Jesus.
So
Yeah, maybe don't send him a cut.
Yeah.
No, I don't want it anymore.
You're
never going to get a cut off of that. You need another year to get a cut.
What I'm going to do is I had those, like I was about to say, I got them ABC seeds. If this thing comes up and has sexual organs, I'm going to cross it with an ABC plant just to have some freaky freaks.
I would spray that thing down with some microbes.
I have, yeah. It's not, it's got to be genetic because.
That's so genetic, man.
I
really
hope it's
don't
not
believe-
pathogenic.
Perhaps.
No, I don't think so either.
It's from a seed though, and the other ones grew normal. So I think
The
it's
thing
just a
is that
weird-
if it was really bad, and you've had it for how long?
like months, definitely 2.
Yeah. So
Other
like the
plants
thing,
would have gotten it. Yeah.
well, no, if it was, well, I was gonna say if it was showing these symptoms and it was really bad, it'd probably be dead by now. So.
Oh, I
Oh,
love
okay.
the idea of every plant in the garden turning into that, like it becoming contagious, right?
I
Well,
was fearful
Called the
for a
stump
second.
disease.
well, don't worry,
fearful.
American One. Your problem is solved. Bugs one in chat says you need some CalMag, and it'll fix it right up.
That's it. It'll fix it
Oh
right
yeah,
up.
that's true.
That's got to be the problem. It needs more CalMag, 100%.
Yeah.
Or for
It has a
organic people,
CalMag
dolomitic
deficiency.
And
lime.
it's just crazy. It's crazy. It's
It's
bizarre.
classic CalMag.
It is a bizarre looking little plant. I see a lot of bizarre plants. That one is definitely right up there.
So
It
CalMag.
tops the freak show for me.
man.
I mean,
That
that's
thing must have been
crazy.
chronic.
I can't kill it. Even though it's not. Yeah, it's
He's
still
never
alive,
flowered
though.
it. This is from veg. It's very first grow from
Yes,
seed.
It's been in veg for
He's
18
pot
hours.
committed,
for
literally.
a
Saying its
long
siblings
time.
were normal plants.
Yes, all of the siblings were normal.
So this is probably a single recessive allele.
It's super
So,
fascinating for sure.
it
I'm
will-
glad that you were able to show it.
And it will. Some of those traits will trickle down to offspring, right? That's from what I've read and understand.
Well, if it's a single recessive allele, probably not so much, right, Doctor?
Well, it would
2
just
in
require
500.
it being crossed with something that already had it. If you self that plant, you'd probably be able to get it again.
I'll see you in 20
And I'm not
years.
confident on that. That would just be sort of, the fact that you have this really bizarre phenotype emerging and you think it's genetic, then it probably is a pretty rare recessive allele. And that means that plant probably has both copies of it. If you crossed it with other plants, it probably would be heterozygotic for that allele, for that gene, and not express that.
Not
trait.
express.
That and
So
ABC
if you
would make
self
some
it,
funky
you could probably
shit.
get that trait to express again. And there's ways to sort of test if that's what it is in terms
Right.
of
You got a 1 in a
Probably
million,
F2s.
maybe 1 in like a billion there, dude. That's pretty cool.
it could be a really rare trait that's very low frequency in the population, and you got 2 copies of that rare recessive allele. That
You guys
seems like a
seen-
fairly likely case to me in a really bizarre sort of phenotype like that.
These dwarf cannabis plants have you guys ever experienced dwarfs?
Usually
Only
dwarfism is
early
a
autos.
result of root damage. So yeah, I mean, there's sort of those cultural causes of root damage that we do, or even chemical or physical dehydration can damage roots. A lot of things that we do as gardeners that can screw up the roots early in the seedling stage can lead plants. And I'm sure almost everybody that's listening to this has had plants that shortly after a transplant will grow like small little miniaturized version of itself for a while. That is root damage. But that's not
Okay.
what I'm looking at in your
No, that's
picture.
no, that's
I
not
do
root
think-
damage. If it,
It'll grow faster
Well-
in a larger pot now. You said it was in a small pot for a long
Yeah,
time.
I just
so
put it-
it'll start to veg a little bit more vigorous. And the bigger the plant gets, in my experience, it typically grows a little bit faster. So it'll grow faster now than it did a month ago or whatever, vice versa. So I definitely think that
it'll grow
hanging
faster
on
if you
to it
start
would be
flowering.
interesting.
Too.
I wonder if it will come to normalcy. I've seen plants start out as mutants, but not like that. That thing has been. Oh, here I found my.
You got to cross that with the ABC if you can. And I think if you just topped it, like cut it in half, you'd have a really cool clone, and you could throw one of them in flower and then let the other one
If
keep
it-
vegging. You know,
If it gets big enough, I'm definitely going to take cuts off of it. We'll see what happens there. But I have
The attraction at this point is mainly the curiosity, right?
yes, definitely the curiosity and the uniqueness of it. But
Well, you know,
I
if you get a lot of people really invested in it, you can get a really high follower count on your Instagram, and you can get a bunch of people to breed with it, and you'll be a local legend.
If there's a trait or some attractive feature, if it's just a plant that grows very
Nope.
tiny and very small, I think there's going to be a marketing problem.
Well, you know, I would think that would be the case too, but I see a lot of people looking for variegations and those sorts of things for, I guess you could call them ornamental qualities, or they
Let me-
assume that there's going to
that's
be
exactly what
another
it is.
effect.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, it may
Face
very
it.
well have ornamental qualities. I agree.
But then people
I'm curious
ascribe that
if it has any like terpenes that would also express or sort of other cannabinoid profiles or something like that. that would be
benefit
associated with that phenotype.
Freak Angel. I already am a local legend, just so
that's
everyone
true.
knows.
And he's an international
there you go.
This
legend.
could only add to the stats.
He's actually
Hey.
current. That's true. That's a good point. That's a good
Jack,
point.
let me have screen sharing once. I want to show you guys these 2 pictures of dwarf cannabis that I have in my libraries. It's actually from a High Times magazine. Shout out to Russ Brandon with his repost of his beautiful nug on High Times.
You should have the ability to share now.
There we go.
I wanted to say shout out to Full Duplex AFN, who probably sent you the Australian Bastard
Yes,
Cannabis.
it is him.
He sent them to me as well, so cheers to him. He's a pretty cool dude, also known as Mandalorian Genetics.
All right, am I screen sharing?
Not yet.
Oh, damn. All right, hold on 1 second. Sorry. Happens every time I try.
Oh, I wanted to say before you do screen share that the Australian Bastard Cannabis and some of the other ones, you've got the screen share now, they have benefits. Like the leaf being like that allows more airflow and more light to get down into the lowers. So like, although the Freak Show was deemed as just like an interesting plant for a while, it actually has come to find out there's benefits to growing it, especially outdoor. The American one, this looks to me unlike a dwarf. This looks like an auto that was grown in a small pot. Look at how small that pot is.
Listen though, they worked that breed, the Freak Show. So yeah, if you read the this picture was taken at 9.5 months. The plant was a natural dwarf and an exact miniature of an indica. It was never trimmed and had fully developed buds. The plant was 9 inches tall and yielded 3/4 of an ounce, according to the caption under the picture.
I would suspect the plant that we're looking at was root bound or root damaged.
Okay, so there's one, and I can move.
And I don't think that that's the same thing as your plant.
Right,
That's what
no,
I
it's
was talking
definitely
about.
not.
More like
Yeah,
that's what you would
definitely.
end up with if you had a really severely root damaged plant.
Definitely not. But here's another shot of that from it was from old High Times. I don't know if that's the same one, but they were just showing off dwarf plants.
That's a
So
different
I
plant.
wonder if it's even real. You know, like
It's real.
when I saved these, yeah. So,
I don't know if it was alive for 9.5 months, but that's a real plant. I could tell the
right.
skeleton.
Oh, of course it's a real plant, but I mean, like, is it a real dwarf or was it a bonsai? Like Dr. Coco was saying.
People didn't understand what the fuck they were doing back then. They still don't now. So it's like when they look at like, oh, I have a mutant, and they just call it a dwarf and be like, oh, this fucking one is growing really slow, and they probably like had it in that tiny ass pot sitting on a windowsill and it started flowering. Like they had it vegging in the summer and it just went real slow and then fucking.
But it's like
Is that one yours now that we're looking at now?
No.
That's another one. Yeah, that also looks like root damage.
Okay.
That's the little miniaturism that I'm talking about, where all of a sudden it grows like regular looking leaves that are like tiny.
Yeah, that's exactly what that one is. Yep.
Yeah, that oftentimes, and you'll notice like the first few sets of leaves will be fine, and then the plant will just start growing these like tiny little sets of leaves. That is because you screwed up the roots somehow.
So it's still interesting stuff, right?
That definitely looks like it there.
I want you to maybe show off some of your little mutant plant and then make me the host again so I could spotlight your video. But before we do that, I want to give Spartan Grown a chance to, if he has any final thoughts or shout outs he wants to give before he gets going. I know he's got about 18 minutes till the Michigan Bros Grow Show, so I wanted to give him a chance to jump in here.
Yeah, just shout out everybody on the panel. You know, it's always awesome to hang, and it seems like I always learn something every time, so that's fucking amazing, right? Shout out to chat and everybody that participated in it. This whole show is pretty much chat. So, chat and Tao. But there you go.
He's basically in the chat. You can't see him. He's the disembodied voice. He's the chat voice.
I just said that because somebody was giving shit in chat about it. And then, and that's it. Yeah, it's just everybody growers love and keep growing.
Thank you again. That's at Spartan Grown on Instagram, and you can find him at Mitten Canico, and you can also email him at spartangrown@gmail.com. Thank you so much, Spartan, for coming.
Grow love, Spartan.
Sorry, Brandon, go ahead.
No, I was just telling him.
Peace out, Spartan.
I actually have a question for you from Sean Russell. They say, at Russ Brandon, what biological products would you use in a new indoor grow?
Well, I have a regiment that I use consistently for every place that I, work at. It's in SOP, but I use the Micro Plus, which has shown there's science to back it up that it helps solubilize phosphate from organic phosphorus, which is, the huge thing for organics, because otherwise you would have to probably use something like liquid bone meal or a phosphorus substance that was solubilized with inorganic phosphoric acid or something like that. So that's huge. It also has been shown to increase manganese. So I have the data for that. I've been working with soil doctor Bryant Morrison. That was one of the kind of things that we were looking at along our journey. And
Bryant Mason, I think is his last name.
Mason, yeah, sorry.
Gotcha, buddy.
Thanks.
Teamwork.
So that's one of the things that we use. I also use the combination of Bacillus subtilis and Trichoderma. Use that as a foliar application and a root drench. That for me is kind of one of the things that helps conserve energy, trying to acquire iron. And it also works to outcompete pathogens. It's just good. It's a good consortium. Those are the two things that I normally focus on for just nutrient cycling and some pathogen suppression. And then I also use, depending on the season, I'll use the Bacillus thuringiensis as a foliar application when it's time, because we all hate those little worms that tunnel out and make mold in our weed.
Do you go BTK or BTI?
This is BTI. That's for the worms. I would no BTK. Kerstaki.
Yeah, Kerstaki is for worms. I think I is for like fungus gnats and other stuff.
Yeah, flies and which I really like too.
Mosquitoes.
But I just unfortunately don't have there. I keep trying to convince my friend to culture the other type of BT, but for some reason they're having a difficult time with it. So until that can happen, I won't be able to supply the Israeliensis.
So I had a question just randomly that just popped up, and another one to follow it up more for the panel, but this is again directed at Brandon from Shredder0911. Has Brandon finished any Mandelbrot OG? And if so, what did he think of it?
No, I haven't. We actually had a kind of like a clone room catastrophe where I have been transitioning out of there and just kind of working more as a consultant, but somebody forgot to fill up the DU or the humidifiers. And so the room went real dry. Everything dried out and killed all the clones. So I had to go pull the Mandelbrot. So I had to pull the Mandelbrots. I had to pull the F1, the SFVOG. I had to pull, I think, the GMO cherry pie, the Congolese. I pretty much had to pull everything that Jodrey gave me. And I had to put it in re-veg. So we just now took full trays of cuts again. So haven't been able to flour it out. None of the Mandelbrot stuff. But interestingly enough, I was talking to, I think it's Ben over at Emerald Mountain Legacy, and they are planning to come on out here. I'm supposed to have a phone call with him. He's coming out here to Oklahoma because we have a lot of property and we're kind of not ready. Like, we can't possibly ourselves do all of the land that we have. So we were considering working with a couple other people to do some collaboration projects with. So I think that may or may not happen. I don't know. I have a bunch of stuff that I'm trying to work on. So.
Something to look forward to for sure. And I know that there are some legendary genetics that you were just listing off, and I can't wait to see you grow it and hear your opinions on it when it's ready to be smoked and shared with the good people. Mamalos710 asks, this is similar to a question earlier. So Mamalos, you may want to go back and listen to the earlier part of the live show as well after this is done airing. But they say, I want to know if I can re-amend last year's outdoor soil. It's a simple peat perlite compost mix that has sat out all fall/winter. I would rather re-amend than buy a yard of new. And I totally am with you there on that. I think re-amending soil is a great way to go about doing it. It saves you money. It's good for the environment, relatively, compared to buying new stuff every time and dumping the old stuff. So yeah, definitely possible. I shared the Spartan Grown re-amendment recipe that you could either scale up, or if anybody else on the panel has thoughts on how they'd go about re-amending something like a yard of soil, and how they'd do that. So I think either Aaron or Brandon maybe might want to jump in on that.
I would just say, even for the home grower, it's worth sending a test to Logan Labs, and you may only understand 20% of it, but there's a lot of us out there that can help you kind of digest the results, and it's worth it, especially at about a yard of soil. It starts to become worth it. So if you're looking at a yard of soil, get yourself a Logan Labs test, and that'll help you be cheaper in how you re-amend it.
So, and what does that cost? And then on top of that, I had a comment for earlier. Somebody said when you're taking samples, maybe you could take it from like a few spots in the bed and then blend it together. Is that the best method, or is it better to take a sample from the first foot of the bed, 10 feet into the bed, 20 feet into the bed, a foot down, and send in all these different samples and see what it's like in that spot versus a homogenized mix of all the different samples?
I'm going to give a really good example of how I do things on a weekly basis for sampling soil. So at my farm, we have 4 beds per greenhouse, and I'll do what's called a 16 site extraction. So I'll take 4 locations from each bed, and then I'll homogenize that soil together to get an overall on that house. But if I want to be more specific, if I'm doing tissue testing along with that, I'll do like 4 site on a particular variety, and I'll take the tissue.
I agree with pretty much everything Brandon said. It's $60 from Logan Labs. And I would recommend going through Sustainable Plant Solutions, because they will turn around. It's $100 and they'll turn around results for you and everything. They'll tell you how to break everything down. I mean, that's where I learned a lot of the stuff, those guys and Soil Doctor, that I know about soil. And what was the other portion of the question, Jack? You said how much was it? And and how do you sample? So I actually posted about this like almost a year ago. I do my background was in psychology, so I studied statistics a lot. So in psychology, we consider a random sample 30 or more, and that has to do with people, and it's kind of complicated. Maybe Dr. MJ might be able to explain more about it, but there's like the statistical number. So I take 30 samples from my soil and do exactly what Brandon says, put them in a bucket, mix them up, make sure the bucket's clean, and sample from there. And they require 2 cups. So usually it's like it's like this much of soil.
I think 20 is the stereotypical like sample size you're thinking of.
It was 30 when I was when we were in.
Depends on what the population that you're sampling is. If
it's a million people, it's going to be bigger.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, then you're not going to be able to get 30 samples.
That was for people. So 30
depends on the size of the population that you're sampling, but that's related to what they often quote as the sort of sampling error, the margin of error, when you hear like a political poll or whatever, and they're like plus or minus 3%. But you need plus or minus 3% is related to the sample size versus the universe that it's sampling.
And one of the things is you have to do this if you want to collect accurate data. So if you want to collect data consistently, you have to make sure that you do your sampling consistent. You have to make sure that you do the same thing every single time. That's part of,
having a good sampling strategy. Yeah. Exactly. It's really, I would argue in a lot of these cases, if you're thinking about like how to sample your soil to send off for analysis, I think the specific sampling strategy is more important than necessarily the number of samples.
I have I don't have one around here. I have these bags that I actually used for like Bokashi products and stuff, and they have these little like one-way valves on it, so you can like, compress the air in there and just kind of seal it up, and that conserves the moisture content. And I always send them off in little packs like that.
The American one's
All right.
got his hand up, and then we got to go into our final thoughts and shout outs because it's 5:55 here on the West Coast.
All right. This question is mostly for Russ Brandon because I think he'll know best. I love the idea of water-only soil getting my plants to look like your plants, and that's impossible, isn't it?
No, it's not impossible at all.
Let's talk.
Well, maybe we'll have to do that next show.
Yeah, because it's probably a long, yeah. But it is possible, you think? Okay.
I'm for it. I love water only soil. We'll dive into that next show for sure. So the American one, thank you for making me the host again. Officially.
Yeah,
on
I
Zoom.
just realized how to do it, and yeah, you could just allow me to screen share, but we'll get
Yeah, I know. I just it made it easier to just that button was more quickly available. Like I have the thing that says ask to unmute, ask to start video, chat, rename, pin, make host, allow to multi-pin, remove, report, put in waiting room. So I could put your ass in the waiting room. No, wouldn't do that. Well, I'll say this. I've had a great time this show. I really love the lightning rounds with the chat. I think the chat is one of the best parts of the show, and bringing it straight into the forefront. I feel like we answered a lot of your questions. So thank you all for asking those questions, showing up and being a part of this community. Aaron the Grower, what are you showing us there? And give your final shout outs and where we can find you.
Thanks, man. Yep, I'm showing you Wedding Crasher 11. So this was gifted to me by Zen Farms up in Oregon. So he drove down to gift me the cut, and it's just gnarly, man. It's got this like leathery Kush scent, and every nug. This was unfertilized all season. I let this go. This was like a 10-foot tall plant, and it just densed out. It's super rusty, and this is also full season 2020. So this is like months old at this point. So it's doing really well. I can't get a good focus on it, but I hope you guys can tell the quality is nice. I am Aaron the Grower. You guys can find me at atgacres.com. ATG Acres is my YouTube channel and also my Instagram. So I appreciate you guys having me here. It's always fun chatting with you guys. And thanks everybody. Thanks chat. Thanks panel. Thank you guys. Much love.
Thank you, Aaron the Grower. It's always a pleasure. And next I want to pass it to Noah the Grower, who didn't actually have too much of a chance to hop in there. I saw his face for about a second, and he wasn't too active today in chat, but we always appreciate you showing up, Noah. So where can the people find you? And do you have any final thoughts for this week's episode?
Yeah, no, I was just kind of paying attention, man. Soil is one of my shortcomings, and when I listen to guys that know more about me, I try and pay attention. That's how you learn stuff, and very happy to be a part of it, the conversation, and definitely was taking mental notes. Yeah, no, I appreciate everything everybody was saying, and I was happy to be a part of it. And if you have any questions, I'm Noah the Grower on Instagram. You can come look at my stuff, and I'll probably be here next week. See everybody there.
Peace out, Noah. Thank you so much for coming. I wanted to answer a question just quickly and not very thoroughly, but they were asking, they said they live on a remote island and they have to remix their soil, and they only have about a third the amount of peat they would need and perlite. Is it okay if they fill up the other 2/3 with cocoa? And yes, you can grow organically in cocoa, making modified growing mixes with cocoa, similarly to the way that you would peat. The other amendments are really going to be what drives the nutritional content, the organic matter, and then you're going to need some aeration in there as well, just to give you a quick 10-second answer before we do our final sign-outs for everybody else. Finally, I have 3 more of you, I believe. I'm going to pass it to Matthew Gates.
Hey everybody, I really enjoyed the Boolean conversation today. Lots of really interesting concepts, and many of which that we should be promulgated more. If you want to find out more about integrated pest management in general and pests and plant physiology and that sort of a thing, you can find my YouTube channel, Zenthanol, the same one I was chatting with all of you in the live chat. You can also find me on Instagram at SyncAngel and on Twitter at SyncAngel, where I've been getting into some paleontological bug stuff, and that's been really interesting, especially with some Japanese paleontologists. Pretty cool pictures over there. Anywho, and actually, Dr. MJ Coco, you can find me at his website pretty soon. Not quite yet, but very soon.
I'm looking forward to that, and the Twitter content is amazing. The cross sections of different communities, scientific, growing, and otherwise, just really awesome. If you know where to look, there's a lot of great content on there. Thank you again for joining us, Matthew, and I want to pass it next to Dr. MJ.
Yeah, we are very excited about Matthew Gates' new integrated pest management guide that we're getting ready. We already have one article sort of loaded, not yet published. He's got a bunch of other ones, and we're going to get that all going. It's going to be an awesome new resource. I want to make sure everybody also knows about the strain review giveaway that we are doing this month. You just have to write a strain review in our forum, and you get a chance to win a Grower's Choice ROI E720, which is like a retail price of $1,100. It's a big 5x5 grow light. So yeah, there's only like 4 or 5 people that have approved strain reviews at this point. The drawing is on April 1st. So get your reviews written in there. There's a cool editor that sort of walks you through the questions about how to write it. Any strain that you've grown and consumed is eligible, and look forward to seeing what you guys produce. I'm Dr. MJ Coco from cocoforcannabis.com, and I'll be here next week. Thank you.
Always
everyone.
appreciate you coming, and cocoforcannabis.com is doing really great work. Just for a giveaways thing, a lot of people don't think they can win giveaways. I won my car in a giveaway. It was when I was in college running track, and there was 3,500 tickets sold. I bought 10 of them. It was like a 1 in 350 shot. And if there's only a 1 in 5 shot right now, I mean, that's actually pretty decent fucking odds.
That's a really good statistical chance.
And people really win our giveaways. There's a bunch
yeah.
of people in the chat right now that have won giveaways. But yeah, no, I think our goal is to get 50 strain reviews. And at that time, if your odds of winning are 1 in 50, that means your ticket is worth $20 because this is a prize worth over 1,000. So I definitely think it's a decent sort of incentive to write a review. It'll be a lot of fun. And if everybody writes reviews, we'll keep doing this again. I got other lights I could put into this for next month. So
killer light too, by the way, the Grower's Choice Smiley's Garden, who's been in the chat, he grows with those Grower's Choice ROIs, and they're amazing. They provide a great footprint. They're reliable, durable, put out tons of light, very efficient. I mean, if I had the space, I'd be entering, and I probably will do a few strain reviews because way back when I think I added some of the maybe flavor options and other plant options.
Yeah, we talked about that, Jack. Well, Jack, if you win, you could do a giveaway on the Growing with My Fellow Growers show, and we could just sort of pass the wealth along. So
that's a good point. I'll definitely try and get on there and do some of my own strain reviews. I think that stuff is very interesting. I did a lot of that in my book. 50 Strains of Green was basically 50 strain reviews with 50 photos. Brandon Russ was featured in it. Shout out to you, Brandon. Again, thank you for the photos of the Gorilla Glue and Limarilla for that book. Thank you to everybody who pre-ordered the first copy as well as the second copy. I'm still taking pre-orders until close to the end of March, early April for the second printing. I'm at Jack Greenstock, like you can see right behind me now on the YouTube. You can DM me there on Instagram or Cannabuzz. I'll get back to you. And also I take emails at jackgreenstock47@gmail.com. You can also find me at Jack_Greenstock on Twitter. Thank you all so much for coming. I'm really happy to be able to try and give back as much as we can by doing these types of episodes, because when I was starting growing, I had tons of questions, and if I could go and throw them out there and get pretty detailed answers from people that have tons of experience more than me, I would want to partake in it. And it's 100% for free. I mean, we're not taking any donations or super chats or members or anything like that. This is just for the community, and it feels really good to give back. And we're all learning together. I mean, I'm sure each one of us probably learned something this week and all the weeks beforehand. So that's the beauty of this community, and we're happy to keep on providing it. Thank you for all the positive feedback as well in the chat. Such kind words and nice things from all the people that are listening. And thank you to all the panel members who show up each week and make this possible. So with that being said,
by the way, bye.
Peace out, the American one. But yeah, Jack Greenstock, everybody, signing out. Peace and love. Have a great week.